The cottage looked too small to matter. That was the first thing Ethan Walker thought as he unlocked the weathered front door. The second thing he noticed was that someone had recently swept the front porch. He stopped. The house had supposedly been empty for nearly 15 years. So who had been taking care of it? Only 2 weeks earlier, Ethan had stood in a lawyer's office surrounded by relatives who barely acknowledged his existence. At 21 years old, he had already buried his wife. Anna had died only 8 months after they married when a distracted driver crossed into her lane. One phone call had erased every plan they had ever made. Since then, Ethan drifted through life one day at a time. His grandfather's funeral had only deepened the emptiness. The family gathered for the reading of the will. His uncle inherited the main estate. His cousins divided valuable farmland. His aunt received investment properties. Then the attorney looked toward Ethan. There is one remaining asset. He slid a single deed across the table. The old Walker cottage. The room burst into quiet laughter. His oldest cousin smirked. The place barely has electricity. Another shook his head. I wouldn't store firewood in that thing. His uncle smiled politely. Think of it as sentimental. Ethan simply nodded. He accepted the deed without saying a word. His grandfather had once told him something he never forgot. The smallest key often opens the biggest door. 3 days later, he drove to the cottage. It sat alone at the edge of an old maple forest. Stone walls, a cedar roof, a crooked chimney. Wildflowers had reclaimed most of the garden. Despite its age, the place felt peaceful. The front porch had clearly been swept. Fresh footprints crossed the wooden boards. The mailbox had recently been painted. Someone had quietly cared for the property. Ethan unlocked the front door. Inside smelled of cedar, old books, fresh coffee, and machine oil. Again, fresh machine oil. He frowned. That smell didn't belong inside an abandoned cottage. Dust covered the furniture, but not evenly. The fireplace had recently been cleaned. Kitchen shelves remained neatly organized. Everything looked prepared. Then he noticed an envelope resting on the dining table. Ethan, his heartbeat quickened. He immediately recognized the handwriting. Grandpa's. Hands trembling, he opened it. Inside rested a handwritten note. If you're reading this, then everyone valued size more than substance. Ethan smiled despite the tears forming in his eyes. That sounded exactly like Grandpa. The letter continued. Don't open the cellar. Repair the water wheel first. He frowned. Water wheel? He stepped outside. Following an overgrown trail behind the cottage, he eventually reached a narrow creek. There, half hidden beneath vines, an old wooden water wheel leaned beside a tiny stone mill. Its paddles had rotted away years earlier. Apparently Grandpa had owned far more than a cottage. The following week became exhausting. Ethan replaced broken paddles, strengthened the wooden axle, cleared decades of fallen branches from the creek. Each evening, he watched water slowly begin flowing beneath the repaired wheel. The work distracted him from grief. Instead of remembering what he had lost, he focused on building something again. On the 7th evening, the repaired wheel finally completed a full rotation. Ethan smiled. It still works. Then, clunk, a deep metallic sound echoed somewhere beneath the cottage. He froze. Another clunk followed. Slow, mechanical, rhythmic. The vibration traveled through the ground. He grabbed a lantern. The sound seemed strongest beneath the kitchen floor. He knelt, tapped the old wooden planks. Solid, solid. Then, hollow. His heartbeat accelerated. No. He searched for the cellar door. Nothing. No hinges. No handle. No trapdoor. Then his eyes landed on an antique cast iron stove. Unlike everything else, its brass temperature dial looked polished. Recently polished. Curious, he turned it. Nothing happened. Then he remembered Grandpa's instructions. Repair the water wheel first. He hurried outside. The creek still flowed steadily. The wheel continued turning, as its wooden paddles completed another rotation. A hidden drive shaft beneath the ground quietly engaged. Back inside, the polished brass dial suddenly clicked. Ancient gears awakened beneath the cottage. Heavy stone quietly shifted. The entire cast iron stove slowly rolled sideways across concealed rails. Ethan stumbled backward. What? Beneath it, a reinforced steel cellar door. Cold air drifted upward. Attached beside it rested another envelope. Ethan. Again. Grandpa's familiar handwriting. Hands trembling, he opened it. Good. The cottage isn't your inheritance. It's protecting it. Ethan unlocked the heavy steel door. A staircase descended far deeper than any ordinary cellar. Stone gradually became reinforced concrete. Steel beams lined the tunnel. Ventilation systems quietly hummed. Automatic lights illuminated one corridor after another. The passage finally opened. Ethan stopped breathing. An enormous underground complex stretched beneath the forest. Archive halls, engineering workshops, research laboratories, climate-controlled vaults, rows of secure storage chambers. Everything immaculate, everything operational, everything preserved. This, he whispered, can't be real. He slowly approached the nearest cabinet. Each carried engraved brass labels. Hydropower systems, property holdings, patent archives, royalty agreements, current operations. Current, not abandoned. Current. His pulse accelerated. He opened one cabinet. Hydroelectric engineering patents, water management technologies, current licensing agreements, current royalty reports. Everything remained active. Everything still generated income. Then, at the center of the enormous underground chamber, a magnificent walnut desk stood beneath a circular skylight carved through solid rock. Resting neatly on top, one final envelope. His name, written in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting. Ethan. His hands trembled, because suddenly he realized. The tiny forgotten cottage had never been the inheritance. It had been protecting the greatest legacy Grandpa had spent an entire lifetime quietly building. Ethan stood silently beside the walnut desk. The underground complex stretched beneath the tiny cottage like a hidden world. Research laboratories, engineering workshops, archive halls, climate-controlled vaults. Rows of polished steel cabinets disappeared into the distance. Nothing looked abandoned. Nothing looked forgotten. Everything looked ready for work. Slowly, he picked up the final envelope. His grandfather's familiar handwriting immediately tightened his throat. He opened it carefully. Inside rested a thick handwritten letter. The first sentence made him smile. If you've reached this room, then the old cottage finally fulfilled its purpose. Ethan sat quietly in the leather chair. The letter continued. Good. Everyone believed I kept the cottage because I couldn't bear to sell it. The truth is, I built everything beneath it because nobody would ever think to look there. Attached behind the letter were ownership certificates, patent registrations, legal documents, access cards, and financial reports. The first page carried a title, Walker Hydro Systems. Ethan frowned. He had never heard the name. He continued reading. Hydroelectric technologies, water purification systems, river management equipment, renewable energy innovations, commercial infrastructure patents, dozens of patented inventions, hundreds of licensing agreements. Every one remained active. Every one continued generating royalties. Current royalties. Not historical. Current. Ethan slowly leaned back. Grandpa hadn't hidden gold beneath the cellar. He had quietly built technologies powering hydroelectric facilities, municipal water systems, and renewable energy projects around the world. The letter continued. People admire rivers. Very few appreciate the engineering guiding their power. Ethan smiled softly. That sounded exactly like Grandpa, always fascinated by the quiet things keeping life moving. Then he reached the financial reports. His breathing stopped. The yearly royalty income exceeded anything he had imagined. Enough to buy every property surrounding the cottage. Enough to guarantee financial security for generations. Enough to ensure he would never fear losing another home. Yet strangely, the money wasn't what overwhelmed him. Only one question remained. Why him? The answer appeared on the next page. Now let's discuss something far more valuable than wealth. His hands trembled. You probably believe I left this because Anna is gone. You're wrong. Tears quietly rolled down his face. I left it because even after losing the person you loved most, you never stopped caring about other people. Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered helping neighbors repair storm-damaged fences while grieving. Volunteering to rebuild a flooded bridge only weeks after Anna's funeral. Fixing broken water pumps for elderly farmers without accepting payment. He had never spoken about those moments. Apparently, Grandpa had noticed them all. The letter continued. Grief reveals character. Some people become smaller. You became stronger without becoming harder. Ethan quietly wiped away tears. He opened another cabinet. Leather-bound journals filled every shelf. Nearly 50 years of them. The earliest volumes contained engineering sketches, hydroelectric designs, patent applications, investment plans, river surveys. Gradually, they became personal. Family photographs, fishing trips, camping weekends, letters Ethan had written as a child. One journal immediately caught his attention, written when he was 9. Today, Ethan spent 3 hours repairing a tiny wooden water wheel in the creek. Everyone else laughed. He simply wanted to see it turn again. Ethan smiled. He remembered that afternoon. Another journal, written after Ethan married Anna. She brings him peace. He gives her courage. Together they remind me why building a future matters. Then another, written shortly after Anna's funeral. The handwriting became noticeably weaker. He believes his future ended with hers. I hope one day he understands that love doesn't end. It becomes the foundation for whatever comes next. Ethan quietly closed the journal. His vision blurred. Then he found the final entry, written only weeks before Grandpa died. If Ethan ever reaches the room beneath the cottage, I hope he discovers purpose before prosperity. For several minutes, he simply sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the underground facility. Because suddenly, the hidden complex no longer felt like an inheritance. It felt like faith, years of careful preparation, years of patient belief, waiting until Ethan was ready to carry something greater than grief. The following months transformed everything. Patent attorneys verified every invention. Renewable energy engineers confirmed every technology. Financial auditors validated every licensing agreement. Everything proved authentic. Every ownership record legally belonged to Ethan. Every patent remained active. Every royalty continued arriving. Soon the offers began. International energy corporations, investment firms, infrastructure companies, global engineering groups. The numbers became staggering. Enough money to retire before turning 22. One afternoon, Ethan reviewed another acquisition proposal. One signature would transfer everything. He almost accepted. Then he noticed a framed photograph beside Grandpa's drafting table. It showed 14-year-old Ethan standing beside Anna, who was then his childhood friend, laughing as they repaired the old water wheel behind the cottage. Grandpa had captured the moment years before either of them imagined they would marry. Beneath the photograph sat one handwritten sentence. The strongest currents don't destroy. They keep moving forward. Ethan smiled. The decision became obvious. He declined every offer. Instead, he expanded Walker Hydro Systems. He funded scholarships for students studying renewable energy, environmental engineering, and water resource management. He established grants helping young widows and widowers rebuild their lives after devastating loss. He financed clean water projects for rural communities that had struggled for decades without reliable infrastructure. The little cottage remained exactly where Grandpa left it. From the outside, it still looked like the smallest house in the valley. Wildflowers surrounded its stone walls. The old water wheel turned peacefully beside the creek. Few people imagined one of the world's most valuable renewable energy archives rested beneath its foundation. Ethan preferred it that way. Every evening, he sat on the porch listening to the water wheel turn. Its gentle rhythm reminded him of Anna's laughter and Grandpa's wisdom. People often asked about the tiny cottage, the locked cellar, the hidden fortune. They believed the cellar had changed Ethan's life. They misunderstood. The underground complex gave him opportunity. His grandfather's belief gave him direction. Because hidden beneath the forgotten cottage wasn't simply an extraordinary fortune. It was proof that the smallest inheritance often carries the greatest legacy, and that even after unimaginable loss, a life built on love, kindness, and perseverance can become the strongest foundation of all.